My name is Gunnar Sequist, and I am with the Bickerstaff firm, and it is our pleasure and privilege to be able to assist the Community College District in its 10-year redistricting process. As Ms. Acosta mentioned, this process is kicked off by the release of the 2020 census data, and the process here is to rebalance and redistrict the single-member Board of Trustee districts for the college. And so, although the board will ultimately make the decision on the redistricting, it was very important to the members of the board to have public input, and so this committee was created to devise some maps and make a recommendation to the board. And as the consultant, I want to extend my sincere thanks to each one of them. They've all worked very hard and done some very good work in redistricting. You've gotten an opportunity to meet the folks who are here today, but I would be remiss to not just acknowledge and recognize the other folks on the committee who couldn't be with us today, including the chair of the committee, Dr. Cynthia Renteria, Mr. Daniel Bueno Jr., Brandon Burt, Joshua Carter Guerra, Julianita, Wesley Lawrence, and Inocente Quintanilla. Although they couldn't be at these meetings, each of those folks have been at the committee meetings and given some very valuable input and assisted us in this process. So I certainly want to recognize them as well as thanking the folks who are here with us today. So as I mentioned, in terms of the redistricting process, the El Paso Community College is governed by a 7-member board of trustees. Each of those trustees is elected from a geographic district within the board, or excuse me, within the college's geographic boundaries. And so once the 2020 census comes out, this process is to be sure we balance the population by changing those boundaries to make sure we have roughly equal population in each of those trustee districts. So what changes as part of the redistricting process? Well, we change the boundaries for the single-member trustee districts. And what that affects is who can run for a particular district, because a candidate for a seat on the board must live in the district for which they run, and also which candidates or trustees voters can vote for, because voters are only allowed to vote for candidates in the district where they live. So the districts and where they're drawn controls who runs and who gets to vote for who. These are the current trustees. As I mentioned, we have 7 districts here at the Community College District. Mr. John Uxer is the board member for District 1. Mr. Brian Haggerty, who is also the board chair, elected from District 2. Mrs. Belen Robles is District 3. Our board secretary, Ms. Cristina Sanchez, is from District 4. Dr. Carmen Olivas Graham is the board vice chair, and she is the District 5 trustee. Ms. Nina Pina is from District 6, and Ms. Bonnie Najera is from District 7. So those are our current Board of Trustee members. And here is a map just for a frame of reference before we start looking at the proposed changes and plans of the current trustee districts. And what you'll see is the way the district is organized is Districts 1, 2, and 3 are at the northern end of the Community College District, moving from west to east. And then Districts 4, 5, 6, and 7 make up the south end of the district, again, moving west to east. A little bit about the legal standards for redistricting. This process is primarily to comply with the federal one-person, one-vote standard. That comes from the 14th Amendment to the United States Constitution. And what that tells us is that for single-member districts, like the El Paso Community College trustee districts, we must have approximately equal populations across the districts. And the reason for that is if you have a particular district that is significantly overpopulated or significantly underpopulated in relation to its neighbor districts, then the voters in that district can either have their votes overvalued or undervalued in comparison to the other districts. So when you have approximately equal population, that equalizes voting power, and that's where we get our one-person, one-vote standard. Because of the way people are distributed geographically where they live, it's usually impossible to draw the districts exactly equal, but the courts have told us that as long as the total deviation between the districts is less than 10%, then the federal rule is satisfied. And so as we go through and redistrict the community college districts, we are balancing those districts by making sure that the total maximum deviation across all of the districts is less than 10%. And the way that we calculate that total deviation is if we take an ideal size, and what that is just the total population of the district divided by the number of districts. So that way, if you could hypothetically have equal districts, that's your ideal size. And then we compare the district that has the most population above that ideal and the one that has the least population below it. And we take the difference between those. And that gives us the overall deviation from the least populous to the most populous from the ideal. And here's kind of a simple example just to show that math in action. If we had a hypothetical district that had 4 districts in it, 4 individual single-member districts in it, and the total population was 40,000, then dividing that by 4 would give us an ideal district size of 10,000. Here in our example, if we had District A that was 10% above the ideal, and we have our District 4, which is 20% below, those are the most populous and least populous. If we take the difference between that positive 10 and negative 20, that gives us an overall deviation across the districts of 30%. That 30% is obviously in excess of the 10% requirement, and so our hypothetical district here would have to go through the redistricting process to rebalance its districts. Here are the numbers for the El Paso Community College District based on the 2020 census. And the total population, at least as counted by the census in 2020, of the community college district is 865,657 people. If we were to divide that by 7, that would give us an ideal size of 123,665 people per each of the 7 districts. So that's generally the numbers we're looking for. If we look at what the population reported by the census actually is for each of those 7 districts, what we see is here, the most populous districts are District 3 and 7. They're overpopulated by about 16.75%. And the least populated are Districts 4, 5, and 6, which are each underpopulated between roughly 9 and 16%. So what we know here is that for our redistricting, the process is going to be consist of moving population or redistributing population out of Districts 3 and 7, and then filling that population in across Districts 4, 5, and 6 so that we can balance those deviations out. And indeed, if we look at the most populous, which is 3 at 16.75% above the ideal, and the least populated, which is District 4 at negative 15.77% or below the ideal, if we add those two numbers together, we do see an overall deviation of the current districts at 32.52%. And so that just confirms for us that indeed, as we sit right now, the El Paso Community College districts are out of balance, and we need to go through the redistricting process in order to get them back in line with the one person, one vote standard. We also report, for anybody who wants to see it, the voting age population or demographic breakdown information that was provided under the 2020 census. And what this tells us is that currently the 7 districts are each majority Latino districts. And that'll remain consistent through any of the plans that you see from the committee today. So overall, we're not going to see a lot of change or difference in demographic breakdown among the plans. It's really just a question of how do you best move population pursuant to some criteria we'll talk about in a moment to get back into that one person, one vote standard. And these are the criteria that the board has adopted to govern both the committee's work and ultimately the board's adoption of a plan. And these criteria come from federal case law. They're what the courts have told us are the criteria that governmental bodies should be looking at when they're conducting their redistricting. And the first one here is using identifiable boundaries. So when we modify the boundaries to single-member trustee districts, we make sure, and the committee has worked to make sure that it's using identifiable boundaries. Identifiable boundaries are major roadways or other geographic features, rivers, golf courses, just easily recognizable geographic features that allow folks who need to determine where they fit into the overall districts, where they vote, where their trustees are. Using identifiable boundaries makes it easy for them to identify that, and so that's why we try to use those. The committee has also worked very hard to identify and maintain communities of interests and neighborhoods. Those are communities that have shared goals, values, and whose representational needs are similar across a variety of issues. And then also neighborhoods that have been traditionally grouped together or voted together as part of this process. So we have tried to maintain those communities of interest in neighborhoods wherever possible in the same district. We're also rebalancing population using whole voting or election precincts. The reason for that is basically it makes sure that we're not splitting trustee districts among election precincts. So that way it reduces confusion because folks who go to their election precinct know that they're only voting for one potential Board of Trustee district. If you end up splitting them, which does happen sometimes, then you have to have different ballots and different people at the election precinct will be voting in different trustee districts, which can cause some confusion. And so wherever possible, we try to limit confusion, limit disruption, and use whole voting precincts. For the same reason, we also are basing any of the proposed plans that the committee is putting out on the existing districts. This is not, the charge for the committee was not to go in and start fresh and redraw all the districts. It was specifically to try to balance population based on where the existing districts are. And again, the reason for that is it just reduces confusion. People are used to generally where the districts are, and so by basing the plan on those existing districts, again, reduces any disruption by redistricting, reduces any confusion, makes voting easier, and that's certainly the intent of this process. We are adopting or working to draw districts of relatively equal size per the one person, one vote requirement. The committee has worked hard to draw districts or make changes that make districts compact and keep them contiguous. And the plans you'll see, I think, have successfully kept all contiguous districts. The committee is keeping their existing incumbents in their districts to preserve that incumbency and voter relationships that exist. And then we are also making sure that any plan that are proposed by the committee or that will be adopted by the board comply with the Voting Rights Act. And in particular, we are looking at Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act, which is an anti-discrimination provision and provides and requires us to make sure that any plans that are proposed or adopted don't have the effect of discriminating against protected race, ethnicity, and language class voters. And so, based on the current numbers and using those criteria, the committee has put together two plans that it's putting out to the public to solicit public input on. And we have them here in the materials, and we also have them on large maps here in the front for anyone who wants to come up and get a closer look. We'll invite you to do that here in a little while. For any members of the public who were unable to be here with us today and who may be watching this on the internet, all of these materials are posted online on the College District's website. So we certainly invite you to go and take a closer look at the plans, the associated population and voting age population tables. Are all available for folks to review. And there is also, for those who are not here, an online comment form where folks can, through the website, submit any thoughts or comments they have on these proposed plans. So in looking at Plan A, District 1 doesn't change very much. It trades just a little bit of population with District 4 on the south end, to give you a nice border between 1 and 4. District 2 changes a little bit more. It gives up some population and territory on the south side between it gives it to both District 4 and District 3 on the south side of the current District 2. But then District 2 also takes in a big portion of what used to be District 3, moving out to the north east side of the county and the district there. So you can see that District 2 on the south side moves up a little bit, but then moves further east to take in some of that territory. District 3, again, takes in a little bit of the old District 2, but then gives up some significant portions of its territory to the new District 2. And the effect of that is District 3 becomes a little bit smaller and more centralized than it currently is under the benchmark or the current configuration of districts. District 4, conversely, also, or by the same token, also becomes a little more compact. It gives up some territory on the southeast side there to District 6, so that where it used to kind of stretch much further down into the southeast side, now stays more central. District 5 gives up some of its existing territory to District 3, but then takes on, again, a large portion of what used to be District 3 out to the northeast side there. And then District 6 takes on some population and territory out of District 7. And so in broad strokes, what we see here are District 6 taking in some of that population from District 7, and then District 3 giving off that population to Districts 2 and 5, and then spreading back west across. So again, the overall goal that we needed to achieve here is by moving population out of Districts 3 and 7, spreading it across 4, 5, and 6. And so that's how the committee accomplished that goal in this Plan A. In the materials that we have also broken each of the plans down into the election precincts. These election precincts obviously are set by the county and determine where you go to vote, at least on election day. But for anyone who is curious about which election precincts under the proposed plans fit into the individual trustee districts, that information is shown here for you in these materials as well. And this gives us the breakdown or the population effects of Plan A. And if you'll recall, under the current benchmarks based on the 2020 census, the community college district has an overall deviation of 32%. By making the changes the committee has proposed in Plan A, that brings that deviation down to 1.76%. So obviously very good deviation there, well within the 10% requirement for the one person, one vote rule. And so the committee has accomplished that goal. We do have, for anybody who wants to see the comparison, again, the voting age, population, and demographic information. But once again, you're not going to see much in the way of change along those lines. Still maintains the same 7 majority Latino districts. There is, in terms of Plan A, the committee wanted to call one piece of information out to the public to solicit specifically information on. And that is, there's been a robust discussion involving 3 election precincts, and those are numbers 120, 121, and 122. And in this Plan A, those 3 precincts fall on the border between the proposed Trustee District 5 and Trustee District 6. And the committee has kind of seen different options of how they might be combined there, and wanted to get some specific public input to the extent anybody lives in those precincts or has any particular working knowledge or interest in them, a public input on where the public feels those 3 precincts best fit. Are they a better fit with District 5 or District 6 or some combination thereof? So if anyone in the public, either here today or watching this online, has specific thoughts about that, please do feel free to stand up and give us some public comments or to submit a comment card on that issue, because I know that is something that the committee would like to have that input on. We also have Plan B that the committee has put together as an alternative. And this plan is in some respects similar, and then there are some changes from Plan A. Plan B's districts 1 and 2 are actually very similar. In fact, and 3 and 4 are similar as well. The primary changes here relate to districts 5, 6, and 7. And in particular, in this plan, District 6, gives a little bit more of its territory to District 5. And then because of that, District 6 is able to take on a little bit more of the territory out of District 7. And so, again, just a different alternative, accomplishes much of the same thing, just a different way to draw that. And primarily, the big difference here is that in Plan B, District 6 is going to come in more into the old District 7, which you can see as sort of the light blue-green shading coming down below the red line there above District 7. So it takes in that area more, also a little bit of a bigger shift between 5 and 6 there. So another option. Again, we have, for anyone who wants to see it, the election precinct breakdown for Plan B. And here is the population chart. Here, Plan B achieves an overall deviation of 3.81%. Same goal, moving population out of the former District 7 and 3, and then spreading it across 4, 5, and 6. Here, 3.81 is a little bit higher deviation than the Plan A, but still a very good deviation and well within the 10% requirement, so also a viable option here. Once again, for anyone who wants to see it, we have the voting age population information, but again, very similar. And then the hope from the committee is, in terms of presenting these plans, is to really solicit and get some public input. And the things that the committee would like to hear are, what do you like or not like about each of the plans? Do you have other suggestions in terms of boundaries, where election precincts might fit? Are there any communities of interest or neighborhoods that you think need to be moved or kept together in some way? And there are two ways or at least two ways of submitting that input. The first is here, we would welcome anybody in attendance who wants to make a comment. We have microphones available to speak directly to the committee. But for those who don't want to do that, as I mentioned, we also have the online comment cards. Please don't hesitate to fill those out and submit those, because those will go to the committee. They'll have an opportunity to consider them as they move forward, and they'll also be available for the broader board when we get to that step of the process. And in terms of the next steps, the committee will be receiving the public input. We do have one more public input tomorrow evening. That'll be, Monday at 6 o'clock. That's November 7th. It'll be at the Rio Grande campus. And so we certainly invite any members of the public who would like to come out for that presentation and to have an opportunity to make public comment at that meeting as well. After that, the committee will be working on finalizing its recommendation, which it will tender to the board on or before November the 18th. The full board currently plans to hold a public hearing on the redistricting at its boardroom in the Administrative Services Center on November 29th. So for anybody, whether you've had a chance to participate in the committee public input process or not, we certainly invite you and encourage you to come to that public hearing in front of the board to be able to address the board directly about any thoughts you may have about the redistricting. After that public hearing, the board will have an opportunity to consider not just the committee recommendation, but also the public input. And then we'll have a chance either to adopt a final map then on November 29th or at a subsequent meeting if it chooses to take a little bit more time to do that. So that is the process going forward. And we certainly, on behalf of my firm as the consultant here, I certainly appreciate all of the committee's hard work and certainly any input from the public. And I know that the committee is also very eager to receive public comment and appreciates any input the public can give us on that as well. So I thank you for your time, and that concludes my presentation.